Hi, very good. Thank you.
Oh,
Very good.
exciting. AR7, it's arrived. What
Yeah,
do
it
you think?
has. It has. And um, mobile phones, texts, direct mails, emails are hot with congratulations and whatever. But yeah, it's been a very exciting morning of the 14th. And so hot takes. What
Yeah,
what
look,
do you think is a hot take?
a hot take. Look, first of all, I was really worried. We talked about it in our last podcast in particular. I think both of us were sweating a little. And really for the industry, because I think we needed good news, particularly in this Q1 of 2026. So I think a big one for me is floating, and some of the hot takes, how instrumental it is getting the stepping stone projects secured now with two, and the regional spread has been amazing. One in Scotland, one in the Celtic Sea. And
Yeah,
I
because it
suppose,
could have all been. I mean, it could have easily been, you know, two projects, one project in the Celtic Sea,
yeah,
and I think it is important that I think it's important for Scotland, and it's important to develop a more balanced floating industry. To
yeah.
be honest, because that both areas are important, and they're both moving forward with projects with awards. So yeah, absolutely delighted for both projects.
Yeah, I mean, particularly for the Celtic Sea, I suppose it's first, pardon the pun, step into offshore or floating, should I say,
Yeah,
and how important that is for the supply chain, getting their first chance to get hands on project
real.
experience on that, the
Yeah.
confidence around looking at, say, really, I suppose, underpinning some of their business cases. It's not big, it's not a commercial scale project, but it's the first
And
step
it's
to
not just,
getting those
and it
business
wasn't
cases.
meant to be by the government
No,
either. I mean, it's so before we dig into flow, let's step back and sort of look at it as a whole, because there's been,
yeah,
you know, the reaction was the pot's small, wasn't it? If we
yeah.
go back to then, we're really trying to kick on to CP 2030. The pot's, quite small, and we're not going to go into the. I think there's a time for going into the politics of it, but even that was sort of challenged at the time. And quite rightly, they've done this. This was the testing of going in and having a look at projects and looking to adjust pots based on the value for money and the balance that was actually in there, and they've done that. We've got 8.4 or 8.6,
8.25 gig.
8.25. There you go. Exact. I'm broad brushed. Who knows exact?
All
Being
countries.
awarded, and I think that is so. Though there's really interesting layers and interesting parts to it. If you step back and someone says, "What do you think?" I think it's a success. It's a real big piece of capacity being put into the market for us now to go into the delivery stage. Grid
Absolutely.
actual connections, the onshore works, the infrastructure, the offshore fabrication, construction. That's now there to be done, and I think there's some interesting things below that, but I think yes, it is a success, and I'm delighted for the
Absolutely.
projects that are through. Commiserations for those that didn't, but there's AR8, there's a whole bunch of things that could be done between here and AR8. So that's my initial
That's it.
feed
Yeah.
when I saw it.
I should correct myself. 8.2 is for the fixed, but it's 8.44 for the overall
That's
with
where
the
I was
floating.
coming
Yeah,
from.
that's where you were
Yes.
coming from. But I mean, look, this is huge. We've seen Michael Shanks quoted 22 billion of capex investment, and we're seeing out of Energy Pulse from Renewable UK about 25, just over 25. Regardless, within that range, it's huge. So what does this mean for UK PLC? This is something that gives us a chance, within the next 3 years, particularly to stabilize and enable, GB to grow, enable the supply chain to, again, secure jobs. I think we're looking around, these projects alone probably would be looking at 7,000 jobs, good skilled jobs in the UK, which is really important right
In
now.
regions and generally in regions that need it as well,
Yeah,
and that's where I think it's and it's yeah. I'm not going to get into the people that are probably going to throw sort of stones at this for political or ideological reasons, but this is a good
yeah,
story for the jobs, for decarbonisation, for our sector. I mean, so digging into it now. you mentioned, so your first take was straight into the floating, and
Yeah.
let's stick with that. We've got something from Scotland. We've got something, so we've got and we've also got the Erebus in the Celtic Sea, and a question was posed to me by a journalist, which was, if this morning is, some might be disappointed with just 2 projects. My answer was, it really depends whose opinion you're asking. I mean, this was always designed. This was not scale. Not scale. There was no 1 gigawatt projects coming in for this. There was a number of stepping stone projects, all different, with different challenges, etc. And the pot probably was always going to support 2 projects. And it is to test R&D, it's to test demo, it's the stepping stone concept to test commercial learnings, etc., in advance of starting to scale up from AR8 and AR9. I think this was a success for floating. It's 2 quite different projects in different parts of, but important sub-segments of the UK floating market. And now coming into the wake of ReVolting, which was already a milestone project, this gives us impetus going into AR8. I think this was a really good result for floating.
Yeah, I'm very positive around it. We had a strike price of 271 awarded to floating, and the projects came in at 216, which is, it's considerable reduction. But I suppose in particular, looking at ReVolting, we had a project which is a lot bigger scale as well. These projects, Erebus came in with 100 megawatts.
Yeah.
And
these are more true stepping stone type projects.
True stepping stone, and the cost reduction side. So you will understand an incremental increase in the price coming from when you're comparing it to the likes of ReVolting, which was around 400 megawatts. But I think combined, each of these projects, Erebus, Pentland, and ReVolting, have a role of their own within building the flow confidence. And I suppose as well, we need to look globally. UK has been leading the charge on floating internationally. This is important for the industry. This is really important just to set those foundations now, build upon them, take the learnings. But I think it's really important for us now to work internationally and make sure that we can work together to scale this, see the true cost reduction as we go into emerging markets as well. I'm sure we'll see projects in the likes of France and South Korea and Japan in particular look our direction and go, okay, we've got to work hand in glove here and make sure that we take this technology globally and build on these successes.
Absolutely. I mean, I think 2 stepping stone projects, which means they're not mega capacities.
No.
But it is there's really good rationale why that phrase stepping stone exists, because basically it's taken us to the next, to that next stage, which is increased commercialization of larger projects, lower cost. And for me, the importance is for the supply chain, because us taking floating to other markets is us taking our services, our products, our technologies, our SMEs, and they need projects to start speaking to that are going to start spending money on these services, on these, and then that will progress as we head towards AR8, which will hopefully then build on that. And I can see a proper trajectory of an industry pathway. Mm-hmm. For the supply chain. So I think this is because to me that's what it means about taking this to emerging markets is if we can develop those supply chain companies, and then they can go on the back of a strong domestic market. So from a floating standpoint, and of course in Scotland, you and I are now shareholders to a degree in Pentland, because SNIB, Scottish National.
Oh yes, yeah. I was like,
like
an option share somewhere.
You wondered where we were going with that.
Yeah, I was kind of wondering.
Where's John going? No, but it's so there's a bit of there's a couple of slices there, the infrastructure bank, SNIB, and of course GB Energy.
Yeah.
So so there is a real stake in floating in a real way, as well as in the supply chain with the investments that SNIB and the likes of some of these policy-led finance players that we can now bring. So I think it's really excellent. So Flow, fantastically exciting. Fixed, doing the heavy lifting in this, which is what we expected. What any initial sort of thoughts that you're seeing on the from the fixed awards?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I mean, RWE was a clear winner with,
Oh,
the bulk of the
they were
capacity there.
exposed as well with a large table of projects that were eligible. So
Yeah,
that would have
I
been a
mean, I
massive
think in
loss if they did.
particular, I really like to say well done to the team in Norfolk because they've been around a long time. They put in a lot
It's
of
been a
effort,
painful journey.
and this is a huge win for them. No disrespect to the other Dogger Bank guys, but I suppose it's been a long road, and to see this come to fruition, and obviously some of the project is in construction at the minute, so this is a huge boost to them just to underpin that and give them some breathing space.
So I mean, obviously, like other consultants and stuff, I had my little list that I was, pretending to be an oracle and sort of speaking to clients around this is where we think it's going to land. One surprise for me was that there was less. I viewed that the fix was always going to be a mixture of elements of the really mega projects
Hmm.
with extensions,
Yeah.
right? And what we're seeing is less extensions in this, which was a bit of a surprise to me. Maybe it shouldn't have been a surprise. I mean, what's your thoughts
Yeah, I
around
mean, especially when you're competing with scale, with the likes of an RWE coming in and aggressively,
needing
competing.
to win?
Yeah, and it's difficult because you're coming in with smaller capacities. On the extensions, look, they're building on obviously the coattails of the projects they have in operation. However, it's probably not a bad thing. AR8 is coming around very, very quickly.
Right.
We'll be in it before we know it. And actually, it might give them a little bit more breathing in a smaller pot nonetheless, but equally, they need to get their, everything in order, whether it's a consent, it's making sure they have supply chain in there. I think it gives them a little breather. Plus, from our side, I think if we awarded any more here, you're talking lumpy pipeline for supply chain. So I think actually it's not a bad thing that you shift some of the load to next year as well, and see if we can keep that pipeline for the supply chain particularly a little bit more linear rather than lumpy.
Yeah, I suppose it's. Um, I mean, ARA is coming down. We're seeing there's the consultation came out just before the start of the year
Yeah.
with some of the changes in that. I think it's quite interesting looking at AR7 with looking at the consultation areas and the suggested changes now that we've seen AR7 as well. So they're sort of extending a little bit the ability for the government to look into the bids.
Yep.
And also they're making some of the changes to floating in preparation for scale down the road in AR8 and AR9. So I think, to me, this has been a very successful round. It's positive for Europe. It's because the supply chain, obviously I want a UK supply chain, but the supply chain is a European supply chain. So I think after some of the trips that we've seen in the Netherlands, in Denmark, in Germany, and all on as well, this is now, it's offshore wind, as long as it's bankable, as long as we pretend it's not 2019, offshore wind can play, and the UK has shown how offshore wind can come through auctions in scale, and what developers are looking for. And I think that will help Europe over the next 2 years sort itself out in some of the auction mishaps that we've actually seen. It'll help some of the supply chains around Europe. I think this can only be seen as a positive step
Absolutely. It's
for us.
very, very positive this week, in fairness. So it certainly cheered up my January. But I suppose, balancing the positivity as well, now the real work is going to start on delivery
Delivery.
and making sure that we support these projects, we support supply chain, we listen to them, and making sure that we actually deliver these now in, I think is more important even than the auction now going forward. I mean, it's a huge, huge hurdle, this, getting these agreed. But what we need to do now is actually have robust business cases, get through FID, make sure our supply chain is supported, and making sure that we can get our hands on this kit. There's a lot of components required there. There's obviously a lot of geopolitical challenges going on at the minute, making sure that we can navigate them at pace and give confidence to the investors coming in at FID stage is equally as important as this auction today. One last one, I suppose, I'm keen to mention is obviously Renewable UK have been giving some analysis out around customers' bills, and
Yeah.
£94 per megawatt hour was very much pointed to as the neutral base for offshore wind. And it's a case of how do we make it. It's £94 per megawatt hour, but it's a case of we've gone below that with an average price of 91. So this is really positive for customers at home as well, for each of you and I as a bill payer. So we need to take the positives where we can. It's a start. We're looking at elements of we're contributing positively, but we've a lot more work to do, is what I'd say.
Yeah, I think that is an important piece, because we know that it's a very, I think the consensus between parties on offshore wind is not where it was 5 years ago. And I think there's going to be, a lot of friction and a lot of alternative facts being thrown around over the next couple of years. And I think that's an important thing to note. And the government and us as an industry need to get those messages out, those jobs that you mentioned at the start.
Yeah.
Right? That isn't just a number on a chart. These are going to be real jobs.
Yeah.
I mean, the jobs that exist are real jobs. The new jobs here are going to be real jobs. The industry that we're building for Flow, because Flow is the industrial opportunity of what we're looking at here, to be honest. And that is a really important, geographically balanced result coming from AR7. With the changes and with the capacity that's lining up for potential AR8 and AR9, this is important from an economic standpoint for the UK, and I think we need to get our messaging really sharp and quite aggressive as well. If we need to be prepared to be aggressive, but a lot of things we'll touch on in more studio and more sort of salubrious surroundings.
Yep.
But we wanted to get something out sort of a bit quicker and a bit more sort of rough and ready. But are we ever rough and ready? I think we're always quite...
It's good to get the kind of, this is one where you strike where the iron is hot in particular, and kind of breaking it down and giving a little bit of insight into, I suppose, the results. One thing we didn't touch on actually, John, was actually Berg Bank, and actually it was quite a lower one. I'm very proud of the Scots, to be honest, get the project through. I have to say kudos to SSE and the team there. They worked very hard on that one.
It wasn't an easy one to probably get done either, based on,
No,
see how they've managed to, and how the project looks.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's quite interesting, and one to dig into is, the price was below the £91, which you've seen in the English project. So it'll be interesting in time, I suppose, to see where the connection point is, how this has navigated the pricing side, particularly around Tunuas, and Scotland having some of the highest Tunuas costs, and escalating quite considerably over the last number of years. So it's a case of how best can we
is
how best we can navigate, I suppose, making sure that we have a pathway for future projects as well.
Yeah.
So will we call it to a close there, John? And in true ReVolting podcast fashion, do you want to do the sign off for us?
Yeah. So it's goodbye from you first,
Yeah, goodbye from me, Una Brosnan.
Goodbye from me. So keep the rotors turning, the heads banging, and we'll be with you soon. Of course, we'll be at events. The Scottish Renewables offshore wind coming up pretty soon as well. But thanks for tuning in, and I'm sure there's more insights that you can share with us as well. So any questions or thoughts or challenges, but it's great news.
Absolutely, yeah, really positive. And get your questions in. We've received some.
With some, but I'd like to. We'd love to see more.
Okay.
Una, cheers.
Thanks very much. Take care, John. Have a good day.